Next up is Kirsten Ferguson.
I was quite nervous to be here, but I'm really glad to see so many people with white stuff on their noses because it makes it all a little less intimidating to be up here. But usually, I've been to the Egg many times, and usually I'm off in the back somewhere scribbling notes in a notebook, in the dark, and that's how I like it. So, but that's my connection to Greg. We reviewed a lot of the same shows together here at the Egg and a lot of other venues. He was either with Nippertown or the Times-Union, and I was variously at Metroland and the Daily Gazette, and then writing with Greg at the Nippertown for several years. So I first met Greg through Andre Polarchek, who is a photographer who was sort of involved with Nippertown at the very beginning. So thank you, Andre, and thank you to Sarah. Thanks to Sarah for your role at Nippertown, because it sort of goes unheralded, but I know you were... So I thought a little bit about how I could do this in spirit of this event, which is a celebration of a great person, a great life, somebody we all loved. And I really wanted to try to avoid crying too, as happened to pretty much everybody. But so every year before the holidays, it was one of my favorite times at Nippertown. I think it might have been one of Greg's favorite times too. Not the holiday shows. I know he hated those, but he called it List Mania. It was a time when he would post all kinds of lists that came out, best of music, best of art, and he asked all of us at Nippertown to contribute what we thought were our top shows of the year. One email, he said, "What moved you this year? What made you think or laugh or dance?" And that's what he wanted to hear from us. So that was one of my favorite times of the year at Nippertown. Music nerds love their lists. So I thought it'd be fitting to put together a top 10 list of my favorite things about Greg as an editor, as a friend. And these are in no particular order, but they're all equally important. Number 10, Greg's live and let live attitude. When I first started at Nippertown, I wanted to find out what the parameters were, what he was looking for, and he said, the only rule at Nippertown is there are no rules at Nippertown. So I said, okay, so I got ready to do my first review, and I sent him an email, and I said, so how many words are you looking for? What kind of format? He just, his response was, Kirsten, there are no rules at Nippertown. So I said, okay, I got it. And he really did mean that. It was open to anyone who wanted to contribute, anything from music to photographs. So number 9, Greg's love for animals, which you saw on the screen before the presentations, all the animal photos, and that he shared with Sarah, both true animal lovers. And that was one of my favorite things in Nippertown, were the times when there were posts of their dogs, that Sarah took great photos of the dogs, sometimes wearing funny hats or out in the fields, and every once in a while the cat made an appearance. So those were always some of my favorite posts in Nippertown. Number 8, Greg's amazing stamina. I mostly knew him when he was in his 60s, and I can't imagine how much energy he had, decades earlier. But any given week, he would send his schedule out to contributors that had where he was going to be that week, and it would be crazy. He would be at a play, an art opening, a friend that was having a party. He'd be reviewing, 2, 3, 4 shows a week, and also attending more. And sometimes it would be even, 3 shows in a night. He'd say, "Oh, I'm going down to downtown to see a jazz fest, and then going to Valentine's for the hurricane benefit." So that to me was amazing. Number 7, Greg's mentorship. I know that he was sort of a reluctant editor in some ways. He, at Nippertown, never really, I don't think, intended to become an editor, but he did, and he really served as a mentor to all of us who contributed there. Not so much in that he told us what to do, but he was just someone that welcomed us and made us feel a part of this great platform. Number 6, Greg's sense of humor. One of my favorite memories of him is from an 11-5 show when Bootsy Collins played, and I remember it was just a really sunny, beautiful day, and everybody was in a really good mood, and this biker came up to him and just said, "Hey, Sarge, metalhead," you know, and wanted to take his picture, and so Greg put on the guy's jean jacket vest and held his helmet, and he got, you know, he was, I mean, you know, he allowed the guy to take his pictures. That was a good moment. You know, Greg was good-humored like that. Number 5, Greg's kindness. You know, he embraced all of us at Nippertown with a real sense of warmth. Really made us feel like we were an important part of this website and an important part of all the fantastic events happening around the area. Number 4, Greg's supportive nature. You know, I know he was there for a lot of people, a lot of friends and Nippertown contributors going through hard times. There was a time when I lost my job, and both he and Sarah kind of came out and supported me and said they were there for me, and that, you know, meant everything. So number 3, Greg's positivity and fairness in his reviews. You know, he really wasn't one to ever do a hatchet job on anything, and I think that is something that people really respected about him. You know, he just had this ability to sum up a show and capture the spirit of it and the emotion of it so well. And I remember he used to file his reviews pretty quickly. They had to be in that night, so he would go home after a show and write the review and send it in. So it would usually be posted online around, you know, 1 or 2 in the morning sometimes. And I usually was writing my review, you know, the next day. So I would go back and check and see what Greg wrote, you know. Every single time I'd say, what is the point of me even writing my review? I mean, he pretty much said everything, you know. So number 2, and I'm going to have to quibble with Bowtie about this one. I thought Greg was a very humble person when I knew him, and you know, I think one of the great things about him was he was never, as another music writer, he was never competitive about that. You know, he was always very welcoming, and there was always room for there to be more music writers, more photographers, more bands, you know, on the scene, and I think a lot of people really appreciated that. And finally, Greg's enduring appreciation for art and culture, as a lot of people have talked about today. You know, if he wasn't out, he was home, you know, making art or watching movies or listening to albums. You know, he lived for this sort of transcendent moments that come from, you know, making and experiencing great art. You know, over the years, he kind of gave me a lot of recommendations of things he was watching or listening to. I started to try to compile some of those, and he posted a lot on Nippertown, and it's going to be a really long list because he appreciated a lot of things. So in closing, you know, I've talked to a lot of people in the past few weeks who really are sort of going to miss Greg, his presence in the music and art scene, and I've sort of thought about that, and I think his spirit's living on and will continue to live on. And I think what I learned overall from him is that, you know, a life filled with music and art and friends and family and pets is truly a life worth living. So everybody get out there, see some shows, and thank you. So up next is Chris Wienk, Program Director for WEXT.
I got into radio a long time ago. I did it because it was a lot easier for me not seeing the people I'm talking to, and also them not seeing me. I remember the first time that I saw Greg Haymes. I was, I think, at the Continental in Buffalo. I was the DJ at the local show, WBNY, Buffalo State College back then. Greg was from Tonawanda, so we kind of claimed Blotto as a local band. Is that okay? All right. For us, he was a superstar, an absolute superstar. I remember the band coming into the studio a few times. I think Blotto was our chief engineer's favorite band because he was always hanging out with them. We'd all wear white stuff on our nose, because didn't everybody? You know, to this day, in fact, I can't smell sunscreen without thinking about Blotto. Not the beach, Blotto. It's great. So we'll fast forward a bunch of years. It was March of 2007. It's kind of blurry at this point, but apparently there were some emails that were kept, saved, and I now have them so I can see if I was accurate in my description here. But Dave Michaels and I were cooking up a radio station, would become WEXT Radio. We decided that the one thing that could really set us apart from every other station would to be play a lot of local music. Yeah. Thank you. I say this led to lunch with Brian Thomas, and then it led to us finding that we should reach out to Greg Haymes. But we were a little nervous about this. Doing this. We were paranoid, to be actually honest with you. We didn't want anybody to know what we were up to. We thought, you know, if everybody got on to this idea of playing local music today, we're all going to do it. Oh, come on. So I reached out to Greg, but I didn't tell him who I was or who we were or anything about us, except we were going to do this radio station that was going to play a lot of local music. We hadn't completed our thoughts, our sentences. We weren't really ready for scrutiny. And, you know, Greg, being a journalist, we were afraid he would ferret out all the information. So I used this old email account that I had from Yahoo. Logged in, had some really strange name on it. I don't know. Anyway, I drafted the first email to the Greg Haymes. I'm like, wow, it's the guy from Blotto. I was nervous, very nervous to write it. I thought, would he answer? What would he think about this email he's getting? Well, very quickly, almost immediately, he answered. He was a bit incredulous, as you might be when you see an anonymous email. You think it's the Nigerian prince asking for all of your money. Anyway, his journalistic mind tried to ferret out who I was and who was behind this supposed radio station. He asked, you really want to mix in local music all throughout the day of regular programming, huh? Even though he didn't seem to believe me, he answered all of my questions, gave us tons of information, band names, favorite records to look for. He even helped us narrow down our focus and really think about who should help launch this station. We wanted to start with a local band, local artist. Greg gave freely of his time. We've been hearing about how great he was that way. Having this email exchange with him was absolutely thrilling. But what later impressed me, besides how generous and how kind he was to help these two goofy guys out creating this radio station, a station I wonder if he thought was real or would ever see the light of day, Greg told us about every band, every artist. His sharing was selfless. He didn't seem to think that he was telling us about his friends. He just was telling us about every single artist, every genre, every style, everything. So my story comes down to this one realization. I thought that that's generosity. He was stepping out of his friend circle to tell us everything that was going on. I didn't get it at first, especially now. I'm definitely getting it now. Later I did realize he gave us all this information about people in his circle of friends. It was you, each and every one of you. Whether he knew you personally, just heard of you, stood in the back to watch you to do your thing, write a piece about what he thought, he cared about this community. He loved all art. It was his passion. And I've said it before, and I'm going to say it again and again and again. Without Greg Haymes, there would be no WEXT the way you hear it now. His love and his passion is the heart and soul behind our vision to play the music of the local 518. Greg is why we do it every day. Every time I play a song, I think about that. I always have, and now more than ever. I'm going to try to measure up to his passion for everything that's created here. To Greg, to us at WEXT, the musicians of the local 518, you are all superstars to us. Thank you for listening, and to Greg, wherever you are, because I've heard you're in different places right now. Thank you for helping us. Thank you so much for helping, and everybody, thank you for listening. Next up, we have one of the great writers and photographers, Ed Conway.
What can I say about Greg that hasn't already been said? Probably better. Thank you. Actually, I wrote something like that, similar, as a full review of Blotto when they played at the Tulip Festival back in 2011. And Greg let it stand. He knew it was a send-up to a previous review by Bowtie that read, I saw Peppino D'Agostino at the Women's Club of Albany and sat immediately next to Paul Rapp, who was reviewing the show for Metroland. Since we saw essentially the same show, I will simply refer to the reader as, go see his review. However, since I left at intermission, to be fair, I requested people only read the first half of his review. That was the kind of editor he was. He allowed a non-writer like me to have fun. I first saw Blotto back in late 70s, soon after they formed, back when Blanche Blotto still played keyboard. I believe she's here, I think I heard. They quickly became one of my favorite bands. I'd sit and watch MTV to see all their videos. And one of my early dates with my wife, Kathy, was a Blotto Shark show at the Colony Coliseum. They became one of her favorites, too. I even took my kids to the shows when they were around, also becoming one of my son Evan's favorites, too. I didn't know at the time that I would end up being friends with a lot of them and actually working for Sarge. Back in 2010, as Kathy and I were getting ready to go out the door to go see Blue Oyster Cult, she did her usual act of seeing the Dogs of Nippertown pictures, and it was a little blurb. It said about adding your name to the list of contributors. So we quickly thought about it. I grabbed a small notebook and a little point-and-shoot camera and wrote up a review and sent it in, along with the pics. To my surprise, Greg put it up. Of course, without the pics, as they were bad. But I didn't know what I was doing. From that point on, I was hooked. And Greg would critique my writing and help me develop something I had always tried to avoid, writing. I actually majored in accounting so that I could avoid writing in college. As the opportunities arose, I started to try and develop my photography. Other photographers at the time, such as Andrei Pilarczyk and Rudy Liu, helped me along the way. Greg continued to give me a platform to display my newfound passion, as well as help create a fraternity for the photographers where we could share some of the stories and enjoy each other's work. Along the way, we were joined by Stanley Johnson, Tim Reedy, and Amy Medeski, and others who I unfortunately haven't met but have enjoyed their work, who also enjoyed the friendly, open atmosphere Greg and Sarah created. To give an example of the influence Nippertown had, I had sent in a review and photos of Nick Lowe and Lost Straitjackets here at the Egg. Actually, it was here on this stage. The manager of both artists, Jake Gorelnik, saw the picture in Nippertown and wrote to Greg, as well as Mark Gamsjagger and Eddie Angel, trying to get in touch with me. All this happening on my birthday, of course. Apparently, they wanted this photo for the back cover of the Nick Lowe Quality Holiday Review live album they recorded during the tour. Wow, my first cover photo, not back cover, but all thanks to Nippertown. Greg was always there to help me out, whether it was to correct an error I noticed in a review or to make an encouraging comment. Although one review I put up, he must have thought I was illiterate. I'd made changes to a review of Wayne Hancock and stupidly forgot to save them. I sent it in without looking it over first. After it appeared, I talked to Greg and apologized for it. And he says, yeah, I thought something was strange about it. So, as I said, he was never critical. He was always very, very welcoming. Recently, I began to look back at my photos and have been assaulting Instagram and Facebook friends of mine with daily images. Once I posted my photos, I rarely look back at them. So this 365-day project of mine was an excuse to look back and see what I had done. It was basically meant for me, but if anybody wants to share, and I'm perfectly okay. The last time I spoke to Greg, he mentioned he was enjoying my posts, so I apologize in advance, but I'll be intruding on you for the next 200 and some odd days. When Sarah invited me to speak today, I was very nervous. Okay, I was terrified. I'm not used to speaking in front of so many people, many of whom have known Greg for very many years. I quickly realized, however, how could I not speak? It's a chance to express just what he meant to me, and I tried to thank Greg for posting my stuff whenever it appeared, but I never had the chance to thank him for the difference he made in my life and my newfound passion. Through Nippertown's encouragement along the way, I've had 2 album covers, several promo photos for musicians and comedians. With Sarah's help, I was able to get a photo pass to Viva Las Vegas Music Festival. So from sending in blurry photos to Blue Oyster Cult to actually getting an Eddie nomination alongside photographers I truly admire, it's been a long journey that I wouldn't have even started without Greg, Sarah, and Nippertown. Michael has a line in one of his songs, Michael Eck, that really hits home. Things we take for granted, they take us by surprise. Sometimes the best things are hidden right before our eyes. I can't think of too many things this would apply to more than Greg. Thank you.